I don't have any set sequence that I depend on. I'll take anything I get. Um, as far as getting into a piece, a chord, a tune, a shape, a distance, anything that seems like it may be a lead. And then the process of composing is following whatever pushed forward. That is, it's almost like I join gladly with whatever seems to want to get ahead in a piece. And over time, I've become even less selective about how that should transpire. I used to feel very anxious, for instance, if I didn't know more or less where the piece was going or what might happen later. I kind of gave that up. And I now really think of every sort of prospector that moves ahead. Usually it's a harmony or a chord. Sometimes it's just a tune. I'm grateful for their bravery in getting out ahead of where I am, because I don't will that part of it at all. It is really not until I have done my nice looking copy that I can either send to my publisher to, it's certainly up to the last minute. I don't want to have to say it's ending because there's going to be always some disappointments, some things that I thought could happen in the piece that didn't. And I will delay that reckoning. I delay that reckoning as long as I can. So it's really, the piece ends when I send it out. Many of us, I know I talk to a lot of composers, and many of us feel that the piece we absolutely most want to write is ahead. It's yet to come. And it's been yet to come for me for a long time, but I have not given up that idea of just putting something away and saying that I can't imagine anything better. I mean, that's what I wanted. I've never really been able to totally say that because it's always a little different from what I want. And of course, we listen to our pieces. We become listeners. And one of the things that I track very closely is inner coughs and outer coughs that to me have come to indicate places where I mistook or made some kinds of mistakes in the motion of the piece, not the emotion, but the flow. So there's always loose ends. But you know, I hold that standard to the old masters too. I listen to great old pieces, and I notice places in almost any great old piece where I feel that something better could have happened. 10 seconds is not a hard duration to find a lot of good ones. It's harder to say year to year what the pieces are of mine that I'm most close to still, because that changes a lot given what I'm most interested in at the time. But yes, 10-second stretches, if I could string ideal 10-second stretches together in some sort of dreams, I would be extremely happy. Those are usually the parts of the piece that are, for me, easiest to get. The very best places. The places that I usually save to work on as the piece is ending and I want to be out of the piece, but there's still a place I haven't got, they are the best I can do. I think most interesting to me right now, a little bit out of necessity, is pieces that are very simple. It can be anything from pop songs to Heinrich Schütz motets or pieces that I work with in my church job, very simple pieces. And for this reason, I do a lot of work with Bach cantatas as a conductor. The stretch of Bach cantatas I'm most interested in now are all written in Weimar in a period of 9 years when he was there, when a sort of bone simple simplicity comes up more often than in his later music. So yeah, right now I'm wanting the pieces that have the fewest notes for, to me, the most immediate emotional connection. The trick from Bach is, it's not a trick, but the I would guess the overall concept that I conjure with every day, and it sounds very Calvinist and or probably Lutheran, is that remark which he's reputed to have made, which I very much think he did, that anyone would compose as well as he did if they worked as hard as he did. The if is a big if. And obviously I know from looking closely at particularly at the 2 years of cantatas where he wrote every week, um, that most of us, all of us, I would say none of us work that hard. But I do feel there is from Bach a willingness to try in every piece, just about every big piece of his I know, some moment that he never needs to come back to because he has so much confidence that his tool kit is broad enough that it will always carry him. And I would love in every piece that I do to have found something that I don't know ever how to use again. So it's kind of the opposite of the toolkit premise of your question. The non-usable fragment that was right once. I know that when I go in to do composition classes, do still Tanglewood and various other places, I tell everybody it's come down to tunes and chords for me. In other words, there's a whole lot of other simple ways or complicated ways, but the most basic way for me to think about composition is I need melodies and I need some chords that are fresh to me. And if that is happening, I feel like I'm still part of the guild. I'm still a member. And all the rest of it is various kind of specialist technical issues that we have to deal with very, very intently. But eventually, ears want to hear, I deeply believe, they want to hear progress, motion, and tunes. And when I think a lot about the other forms of music that interest me, particularly jazz, I think it's the same issue. We need, if we're jazz players, we need to state the material very plainly. And as composers, we need to give listeners very, very clear messages sometimes, which are often in the form of very apprehendable tunes and chords. Not intentionally. There are certainly things that I work on and they sit in my notebooks, and I never find a purpose for them, but I have not designated them in such a form. But certainly, yeah, and I think my old notebooks are filled with things which never pointed in any really useful direction, and that's where they'll stay. But I think everything else, I hope, if I really question myself, I really hope that there are some ears somewhere for it. Because unless someone else perceives it, it doesn't actually exist. I started out thinking I just as much wanted to be a writer of some kind, poet. I was an English major for a while, and I felt quite at home there, and um, I did quite well as a poet for a while. And I eventually I realized that that was all about being able to deal with texts when I became a composer, to try to understand sort of what it was about text that was so important in the whole soul of music somehow. Uh, but writers I admire immensely, and I have friends who are writers, and I have an admiration for what they do, which is almost worshipful, I'd have to say. Um, I think that's an amazing world. And um, whenever I set a poem of someone I know, it almost makes me a little bit nervous because I feel that I've walked into their workshop with big muddy shoes on, and maybe really messed it all up. But writing, yes, writing was the other thing that always gripped me. I felt so proactive and so engaged with what words. I was very much afraid of collaboration. And the collaborative aspect of setting other people's poems always makes me a little nervous. Fortunately, I've had the gift of working with some living poets who are very honest, and who will genuinely say here when I set their work. I mean, I remember specifically a poem of Louise Glick, which I set in an agitated, almost kind of hysterical way. And she said to me after she heard it, she said, that I always thought that was one of the calmest poems I ever wrote. Um, that scared me a little bit, but it also felt very interesting, um, because I guess when it becomes music, other forces begin to take over. And it's after all only one person's reading. Um, but um, I think that the combination of music and words remains for me the most interesting part of musical art. Uh, Vocal music to me is always further down the track towards a very intricate, complete kind of communication, um, with the people who listen to it.